One seat at the table was left empty. Hai Hongjun, the general once promised as Xi Jinping's successor in the PLA, gone. Detained before sunrise. No explanation, no trial, just an empty chair at the Monday briefing. But the silence said more than any headline. Inside the Zongnanhai compound, eyes shifted. Whispers grew louder. Who's next? Which side are you on? Because when a leadership built on fear starts purging its own, the question isn't about loyalty anymore. The question is how long before someone makes the first move. It was supposed to be a routine Monday morning briefing. But Hai Hongjun's seat was empty. No announcement, no press release, no public accusations. Just a quiet removal, and a message that echoed through every hallway of Zongnanhai. No one is safe. Hai wasn't just another general. He was the successor, handpicked by Xi Jinping, elevated faster than any military leader in recent memory, pushed ahead of older, more experienced officers, bypassing chains of command, breaking protocol. His rise was Xi's plan to lock down the PLA, to ensure loyalty where it mattered most. But that plan is now in pieces, because the moment Hai disappeared, the whispers began. Not from the West, not from foreign media, from the officers, the commanders, the sideline veterans who had watched Hai climb past them and resented every step. Behind the facade of military unity, the resentment had been building for years. Hai wasn't one of them. He hadn't earned his stripes the hard way. He was promoted by decree, not by respect. And Xi's gamble, that fear could buy loyalty, had worked only as long as the money kept flowing. But the money stopped. The tariffs hit. Factories shut down. Export cash dried up. Military budgets froze. Promotions stalled. Exercises cut. Training scaled back. The same commanders who were told to obey started asking why. And when the purge began with Hai, the door opened. Because if the chosen successor could fall, so could anyone. The power structure inside the PLA is not flat. It's layered. Generals, regional commanders, political commissars, veterans turned advisors, officers whose loyalties run deeper to each other than to any single leader. For years, Xi had worked to break those loyalties, to replace them with loyalty to him alone. But he never fully succeeded. When Hai Hongjun was dragged into detention, the quiet alliances inside the military began to shift. No one spoke openly. Not yet. But in private, the questions were asked. Who signed the order? Who's still standing with Xi? Who's waiting for their chance? Across the Northern Theater Command, whispers moved faster than official reports. In the Southern Command, mid-level officers started avoiding closed-door meetings. In Beijing, veterans of the old guard quietly resumed contact with each other. Not plotting a coup, not yet, but positioning. Because in a system ruled by purges, survival is about knowing when to stand back and when to strike. Hai's arrest didn't just remove a successor. It removed the glue that held Xi's control over the military together. The message was supposed to be strength. But what the PLA heard was weakness. What they saw was desperation. When power moves by fear alone, the first crack is always the loudest. And the fall of Hai Hongjun wasn't just a crack. It was the sound of walls beginning to shake. The arrest of Hai Hongjun wasn't just about removing one man. It was about removing a cornerstone. The piece Xi Jinping had counted on to hold the military in place. The bridge between his leadership and the loyalty of the PLA. But once that cornerstone cracked, the entire structure began to shift. Because the PLA was never truly unified under Xi. It was managed, controlled, bullied into line by purges, promotions, and promises. But the resentment never disappeared. Behind the medals and the salutes are factions, invisible lines that cut through the PLA's top ranks. Lines of geography, lines of history, lines of loyalty that don't always lead back to Beijing. The Southern Theater Command, traditionally the most outward-facing, with ties to the South China Sea operations, holds senior officers who built their careers long before Xi's rise. Men who watched their pathways blocked by Hai Hongjun's sudden ascension. In the Northern Command, commanders with deep roots in border security and missile forces have their own networks, independent, quiet, patient. The Western Command, with its focus on Xinjiang and Tibet, has long maintained semi-autonomous relationships between political commissars and military leadership lines of power that she could never fully cut. Then there are the rocket forces, the guardians of China's nuclear deterrent. A force where loyalty is everything, but where fear breeds calculation. These are not junior officers. These are men with rank, with soldiers beneath them, with influence across the regions. And when Hai Hongjun fell, they didn't rush forward. They stepped sideways, quietly pulling back from meetings, leaving messages unanswered, watching, not challenging Xi directly, not yet, but withholding the one thing he can't lead without: trust. In China's political culture, loyalty is often a performance, a dance of public agreement and private positioning. But in the military, especially at the top, that dance can turn deadly. Veteran commanders, some retired but still influential, began reappearing at closed-door events. Old relationships rekindled, quiet dinners, safe conversations in trusted circles. The topic was always the same: who else is unhappy? Who will make the first move? Meanwhile, she responded the only way he knows how: more purges. Investigations launched against 2 deputy logistics officers in the Western Theater. Quiet audits of military procurement contracts. Whispers of corruption charges against generals once seen as untouchable. But every arrest sent the same unintended message: if they can fall, so can you. And the calculus shifted. No one inside the PLA leadership believes that Washington is orchestrating these moves. They don't need to. The generals are watching the same numbers as everyone else. The economy is bleeding. The factories are closed. The workers are angry. The veterans are restless. The power that once flowed smoothly from Beijing down through the chain of command now drips like a leaking pipe. In a system where survival depends on staying close to power, the moment that power looks unstable, people start to hedge. Some factions inside the PLA are simply waiting, hoping she can reassert control, buying time. But others are reaching out. Back-channel contacts, off-the-record conversations with former officials, civilian elites, and even international intermediaries. No one is calling it a coup. Not yet. But the lines are shifting, the alliances realigning, and the trust that once kept Xi at the center of the military is cracking. Hai Hongjun's arrest was meant to solidify control. Instead, it signaled that control is already slipping. And in the PLA, when trust breaks, power doesn't just fade. It moves. In China, politics and money are never separate. The factories power the banks. The banks feed the provinces. The provinces fund the military. And at the center of that system, the loyalty flows upward as long as the cash flows down. But when the money stops moving, so does the loyalty. That's the real power balance in Beijing. And right now, the balance is breaking. Started quietly, the way these things always do. Cancelled contracts, missed payments, private investors pulling out of belt and road projects in Southeast Asia. Supply chains rerouted. New funding rounds delayed. Officially, it was market adjustments, a natural response to global conditions. But in the private meetings, behind the red doors and the smoked glass of China's financial hubs, the language was different. Don't get too close. Don't tie yourself too tightly to Zongnanhai right now. 4 years, China's billionaires and state-connected business elites played the game well. Funding government-backed infrastructure, investing in sectors favored by Beijing, sitting on advisory councils, keeping close to the center of power. It was good business. It was safe. But that was before the tariffs, before the factory shutdowns, before the purge. Because business elites like generals know how to read the air. And the arrest of Hai Hongjun sent a message not just to the military, but to the people who write the checks. The center is unstable. Xi's relationship with China's business community has always been uneasy. Unlike his predecessors, who relied on corporate growth to stabilize the party, Xi has kept the private sector at arm's length. The tech crackdowns, the public humiliation of Jack Ma, the forced donations from Tencent and other giants for common prosperity. The message was clear: the party comes first. But now, with the economy choking, that message is backfiring. Because the money that once flowed into Xi's projects, the showcase deals, the defense contractors, the belt and road pipelines, is stalling. At CITIC Group, at Bank of China, at provincial lending offices across Guangdong and Zhejiang, the risk managers are quietly redrawing their maps. Credit approvals are taking longer. Loan guarantees once rubber-stamped are now under review. Infrastructure contracts tied to PLA-linked companies are being delayed, sometimes canceled outright. Not because the projects don't make sense. Because no one wants to be caught on the wrong side if this leadership reshuffle turns into a collapse. It's not just the banks. It's not just the financiers. Real estate developers, logistics giants, port operators, all asking the same question. Who will be in charge next year? And until they know the answer, they're holding their cash. The ripple effect is everywhere. Shipments slowing. Orders deferred. Construction sites sitting idle. Investment deals frozen mid-signature. One business consultant in Shanghai, speaking off record to the Wall Street Journal, described it this way. No one wants to say it out loud, but the money is stepping back. Everyone's waiting to see where this goes. The longer the purge continues, the tighter the money gets. Because even Beijing's inner circle knows, the business elite can survive a downturn. What they can't survive is being on the losing side of a power struggle. The political gamble for China's entrepreneurs has always been simple. Stay close enough to the party to be safe, but not so close that you can't walk away if the leadership falls. Now that gamble is being tested. In Hangzhou, in Shenzhen, in Shanghai, the owners of factories, logistics firms, and tech startups are hedging. Some are moving cash abroad. Some are quietly investing in Vietnam, in Malaysia, in Mexico. Not because they want to abandon China, because they see the writing on the wall. The purge is a warning, but the silence from the business class is an answer. She may have the army, he may have the courts, he may have the propaganda machine, but he doesn't have the money locked down. Not anymore. And in China, when the money moves, power follows. The generals are watching. The business elites are waiting. And the man who once claimed absolute control is standing on ground that's growing softer by the day. The soldiers don't speak on camera. The commanders don't post on Weibo. But inside the barracks, the message is spreading faster than any broadcast. The purge has reached the army, and the army is watching. When Hai Hongjun disappeared, the official line was familiar: anti-corruption, disciplinary action. Party discipline must be upheld. But no one in uniform believed that story, because Hai wasn't just another corrupt general. He was Xi Jinping's bet, his hand-picked successor in the PLA. The symbol of the leadership's hold over the chain of command. If the chosen one could be taken down overnight, who else was safe? Inside the PLA, loyalty has always been transactional. Promotions, bonuses, career paths, stability. The party provides, the officers comply. But when the system starts to purge its own, that transaction gets harder to believe. The warning signs were already there. Budget freezes. Training drills canceled. Fuel rations cut for certain units. Delayed payments. Rumors of coming salary reductions. For the veterans, the older officers who've seen this movie before, the alarm bells were ringing. When the money stops, the trouble starts. Because for the rank and file, patriotism isn't enough. The soldiers want guarantees. The officers want careers. And when those promises begin to crack, discipline follows. The first shift was subtle. Mid-level commanders started pulling back from the usual handshakes, skipping optional meetings, staying quiet in discussions, watching which direction the political wind might blow. Not openly disloyal, not yet, but hedging their bets. In the Southern Theater Command, younger officers quietly reached out to retired mentors, veterans who had been sidelined under Xi's military restructuring. In the Northern Command, logistics captains began asking quiet questions. Is it safe to back the current leadership? The message traveled fast through the rocket forces, where the stakes are highest. Nuclear readiness requires absolute control. But trust, once shaken, spreads like fire, and the fuel was already there. Behind closed doors, in the mess halls and over encrypted chats, the conversation kept returning to the same points. Why Hai Hongjun? Who ordered it? Who benefits if the leadership falls? In the PLA, history weighs heavy. They remember the Cultural Revolution, the leadership purges of the 1980s. They know what happens when politics infects the ranks. It doesn't just weaken the army, it divides it. The PLA isn't a monolith. It's a network of relationships across units, across regions, across generations. And right now, those relationships are realigning. Not for ideology, not for democracy, for survival. Mid-level officers, the ones who command the brigades, who run the logistics chains, who oversee daily operations, are the tipping point. If they lose faith, the top brass can't hold the line. They don't need to rebel. They don't need to mutiny. All they have to do is stop showing up. Stop answering the phone. Stop following orders without asking questions. And in a command system built on speed and obedience, that kind of silence is deadly. The leadership sees it. That's why the purges are escalating. New investigations, more detentions, a fresh wave of loyalty inspections ordered in the Western Command. But fear has diminishing returns. The more she tightens his grip, the more the officers wonder if the successor can fall, if the money is drying up, if the business elites are backing away. Why should we be the last ones left holding the line? The generals are calculating. The mid-level commanders are hedging. And the soldiers? They're watching both. In a system built on control, losing the military's quiet consent isn't a small crack. It's the beginning of the wall collapsing. The calls weren't official. There were no press conferences, no signed declarations. But the questions were being asked in Brussels, in Tokyo, in Delhi, in Washington. Who comes after Xi? Because outside the walls of Zhongnanhai, foreign governments had already begun to plan for the next chapter. The US didn't need to send troops. The EU didn't need to draft sanctions. They just had to wait and prepare. The message, quietly passed through diplomatic backchannels, was simple. We're not here to choose your leader, but we're ready to talk when the leadership changes. In Southeast Asia, Vietnamese negotiators reported a noticeable shift. American trade envoys were suddenly asking more detailed questions about supply chains, about partner vetting, about fallback options if things in Beijing become unstable. In India, officials close to the Ministry of Commerce admitted privately to Nikkei Asia, the Americans are not discussing Xi. They're discussing China minus Xi. In Europe, conversations at the OECD and WTO began to turn toward contingency planning. Not if, but when. In private investor briefings in London and New York, the term China ex-Xi risk started appearing in reports. It wasn't just about the tariffs anymore. It wasn't just about the economic slowdown. It was about what happens when power in Beijing fractures, and the world still needs to do business. Behind closed doors, senior diplomats in Berlin floated the same scenario that Washington was hearing. If the purge keeps growing, who answers the phone on the other side? The Americans had already sent their signal. Subtle but clear. From the Pentagon to the State Department, from the USTR to the White House, the line was consistent. The door is closed for Xi, but it's not closed forever. No official offers. No direct involvement. Just enough ambiguity to let the factions inside China know. If the leadership changes, the conversation can restart. That ambiguity is powerful. Because in Beijing, where trust is already cracking, the suggestion that the world is ready to engage with the next man plants seeds of doubt where loyalty used to live. It wasn't just governments watching the purge unfold. It was corporations, banks, investors. The global supply chain can't wait for stability. And in boardrooms from Seoul to Singapore, contingency plans are already on the table. Who do we call if Zhongnanhai goes dark? Who speaks for China if she can't? In Australia, mining executives began lobbying for new deals on rare earth exports, without the need to pass through Beijing's middlemen. In Japan, chipmakers pushed harder for supply chain diversification, anticipating longer instability. In Brazil, trade officials confirmed that talks with Chinese counterparts had quietly slowed down, waiting, as one insider put it, to see how the leadership situation plays out. Even Russia, Beijing's so-called ally, hasn't stepped in to stabilize the picture. Moscow isn't offering a lifeline. They're watching the walls shake and positioning to exploit whatever comes next. The isolation is not loud. It's not headline news. It's quiet, strategic, and deadly, because Xi Jinping's power wasn't built on brute force alone. It was built on the image of inevitability, the sense that he was the only man who could hold it all together. But inevitability dies the moment people start asking who's next. Right now, they're asking, in embassies, in boardrooms, in military briefings, not if, when. Xi's voice still echoes through state television. His image still fills the front pages. But behind the closed doors of foreign ministries, the chairs are already turning toward the future. The next man may not have a name yet, but the world is ready to pick up the phone when he calls. The factories are closing. The generals are hedging. The business elites are pulling back. The world is already looking past him. But inside Zhongnanhai, the real fight is just beginning. The purge was meant to tighten Xi Jinping's grip. Instead, it exposed how fragile that grip has become. The question now isn't about foreign pressure. It's not about tariffs. It's not about Washington. It's about the men sitting across the table from Xi. The men who once stood behind him, now quietly wondering if they should be the ones holding the knife. This is not a coup from outside. This is a fracture from within. The only question left is, who makes the next move? Stay tuned. This story isn't over.